Welcome to a journey through pivotal events in European history as we delve into one of the most influential conflicts of the 19th century. In this video, we'll take you to the heart of the Franco-Austrian War, a war that reshaped the map of Europe and played a crucial role in shaping the future of modern Italy. How did the war between France and Austria begin? What were the political and economic motives behind this conflict? And how did this war impact the political balance of the European continent? In this video, we'll explore the events of the war, the major battles that altered the course of history, and the outcomes that marked a major turning point in the path toward Italian unification and in the relationships among the great powers. If you're a fan of history and the analysis of major events, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to stay updated. By the mid-19th century, Italy was fragmented into a mosaic of small states and principalities, their allegiances divided between direct Austrian control, French influence, or papal rule. Amidst this patchwork, the Kingdom of Sardinia Piedmont, headquartered in Turin, stood as the sole nucleus aspiring to unify the country under a single banner. This ambition, however, was fraught with obstacles. The Austrian Empire was not only the dominant power in northern Italy, especially in Lombardy and Venetia, but also the conservative guardian of Europe's traditional balance of power, wary of any nationalist movement that might threaten the established order. In this complex political climate, Count Camillo di Cavour, Prime Minister of Piedmont, emerged as one of Europe's most prominent statesmen. Cavour was no romantic revolutionary like Garibaldi. He was a skilled politician who believed that Italian unification could not be achieved through speeches or uprisings, but rather through strategic alliances and calculated diplomacy. He fully understood that his country alone could not defeat Austria, and thus sought the support of a major European power. Cavour found his opportunity in France, specifically in Emperor Napoleon III, a man driven by both personal and political ambitions to restore his country's status as a central force in European affairs. Napoleon III was sympathetic to nationalist causes and inspired by a desire to emulate the military and political glory of his uncle, Napoleon Bonaparte. Moreover, France viewed Austrian influence in Italy as a threat to its strategic interests in the Mediterranean. The relationship between Cavour and Napoleon III solidified through a series of secret meetings, the most notable of which took place in Plombières, Switzerland, in July 1858. During this meeting, the two parties reached a secret agreement. France would provide military support to Piedmont in the event of an Austrian attack. In return, Cavour promised to cede the territories of Nice and Savoy, two Alpine border regions, to France as compensation for its assistance. This was a bold move. Though the agreement was never officially announced, it laid the foundation for an asymmetrical alliance whose ultimate aim was to break Austrian dominance in northern Italy. To activate this alliance, Cavour needed Austria to appear as the aggressor, making it seem as though France was merely defending an attacked ally rather than initiating a war. Thus, Piedmont began mobilizing its troops along the northern border and coordinating with Italian nationalists in the duchies under Austrian influence, prompting Austria to issue an ultimatum demanding Piedmont's withdrawal, an ultimatum that Cavour flatly rejected, paving the way for war. This delicate political phase preceding the outbreak of hostilities was not merely a prelude to war, it was a prerequisite. Italian nationalist ambitions intertwined with France's imperial agenda, while Cavour's pragmatic calculations merged with Napoleon III's theatrical flair. All of Europe watched tensely as any spark in the Italian peninsula risked igniting a broader regional conflict, especially given the fragility of traditional alliances and the lingering effects of the 1848 revolutions that had rocked the continent. Therefore, the Franco-Austrian War was not simply the result of a sudden military confrontation, but the product of a finely woven web of political calculations and intersecting interests, crafted by a diplomatic elite who understood that the new geopolitical map of Europe would be drawn not only by the sword, but also by the ink of secret agreements and implicit treaties. After Cavour's secret pact with Napoleon III in Plombières, the path was cleared for direct confrontation with Austria. Yet war would not erupt automatically upon signing the alliance. It required precise, calculated steps to provoke Austria into appearing as the aggressor. Cavour knew French support was conditional on Piedmont suffering a clear act of aggression, so he set a dual plan in motion that combined military pressure with political provocation. Piedmont began massing troops along its northern frontier, areas closest to Austrian-controlled territories, particularly Lombardy. These movements were neither covert nor disguised. Their aim was clear: to provoke Austria and make it feel its possessions were at risk. At the same time, Cavour intensified his clandestine support for nationalist movements in neighboring Italian duchies like Parma, Modena, and Tuscany. These regions were already simmering with popular unrest against their Austrian-aligned rulers. Protests and demonstrations erupted there, demanding Italian unification and accession to Piedmont, further alarming Vienna and escalating tensions. Austria, meanwhile, observed Piedmont's moves with increasing unease, yet hesitated to act militarily, fearing it would appear as the aggressor before Europe. But internal pressures within the Austrian court, particularly from its conservative faction that saw inaction as weakness, forced the government to take a decisive stance. In late April 1859, Vienna issued a final ultimatum to the Kingdom of Sardinia Piedmont, demanding disarmament and the withdrawal of troops from the border regions. This ultimatum was firmly rejected by Cavour, who saw Austria's escalation as a golden opportunity to fulfill his end of the bargain with France. In response, Austria declared war on April 29th, and its forces began advancing from Lombardy into Piedmontese territory, marking the formal outbreak of hostilities. At that moment, France officially entered the conflict. Napoleon III announced his country's intervention on the side of Piedmont, portraying Austria as the one who had ignited the war. Thus, the condition for French involvement was fulfilled, and a new chapter in European conflict began. It's worth noting that despite Napoleon III's early enthusiasm for the war, he was not eager for a prolonged campaign. His aim was a swift and decisive victory that would solidify his image as a champion of Italian freedom and boost his political standing at home, without dragging France into a politically or militarily draining conflict. In Italy, the people followed developments with intense anticipation. This war marked the first real confrontation against Austrian dominance and carried with it the seeds of hope for national unity. Italian cities were charged with emotion, meetings were held, rallies organized, and volunteer brigades began forming. These patriots saw in the war a chance to achieve what previous revolutions, particularly that of 1848, had failed to accomplish: the expulsion of Austrian rule. In the summer of 1859, the Franco-Austrian War commenced under carefully crafted military strategies from both sides. The battles were pivotal in determining Italy's future. The main focus centered on controlling Lombardy, then under Austrian rule, and weakening the Austrian army enough to allow France and Piedmont to realize their strategic goals. The Battle of Magenta was one of the first major engagements of the war, taking place in northern Italy near the Ticino River. The French army, led by Napoleon III and allied with the army of the Kingdom of Sardinia Piedmont under General MacMahon, clashed with the Austrian army under General Johann von Gyulai. The French aimed to secure a swift victory over the Austrians and seize Lombardy. Their attack focused on locating the Austrian army within a narrow area between the Ticino River and the surrounding mountainous terrain. At the beginning of the battle, the French forces suffered significant losses due to strong Austrian defensive positions. However, the French quickly gained the upper hand. The result was a shift in the front lines in favor of France, as the Austrians were lured into open combat and encircled by the French army, ultimately leading to a full Austrian retreat. This battle was a strategic step that paved the way for the French to take control of Lombardy. Both sides suffered heavy casualties, but it marked the beginning of French dominance in the conflict. The Battle of Solferino was one of the most prominent and bloodiest battles of the Franco-Austrian War, involving a fierce confrontation between the French and Austrian armies near the town of Solferino in northern Italy. It served as a true test of both armies' capabilities and revealed the harsh consequences of modern warfare, including the vast scale of human losses that could occur in such a large-scale battle. In this battle, the French army once again moved against the Austrian forces entrenched in defensive positions. The French launched a series of calculated maneuvers, as Napoleon III sought to break the Austrian front using his well-trained troops. Although the Austrians had numerical superiority, they offered strong resistance and were able to halt the French advance in some areas. Nevertheless, neither side achieved clear dominance during much of the battle. Still, by the end, the French managed to breach the Austrian defensive lines. Despite the heavy losses, Emperor Franz Joseph I of Austria chose to retreat rather than surrender. Even so, Austria had lost its ability to continue fighting effectively, placing it in a weak negotiating position. The aftermath of the Battle of Solferino put immense pressure on Austria, prompting both France and Austria to seek a political solution. Based on their victories, Napoleon III pushed Austria to agree to an immediate armistice. Although the Battle of Solferino was not entirely decisive, it marked the beginning of the end of Austrian dominance in northern Italy. The earlier victory at Magenta had opened the way for the French to enter Lombardy, putting Austria in a strategically vulnerable position. After the battle, the Austrians withdrew from several Italian regions, and France gained greater leverage to impose its terms. From a humanitarian perspective, the Battle of Solferino was one of the first to result in such a catastrophic human toll during that era. Due to the high number of casualties, the international community began seriously considering the need to improve the treatment of the wounded and to organize humanitarian operations during wars. This battle inspired the founding of the International Red Cross, established by Henry Dunant after witnessing the suffering of soldiers on the battlefield. Following the major defeats at Magenta and Solferino, the Austrian Empire began considering withdrawal from the war. Although the Austrian army had shown stubborn resistance, the strategies of the French, supported by the Piedmontese forces, had significantly weakened Austria's military position. Ultimately, France pressured Austria into accepting an armistice, leading to the signing of the Treaty of Villafranca on July 11, 1859, which ended the fighting and resulted in Austria's surrender. The battles fought by France and Piedmont against Austria had broad implications for European history. While they did not lead to the decisive victory required to fully unify Italy, Austria lost control over most of northern Italy, and the path toward Italian unification came closer than ever. The signing of the Treaty of Villafranca brought a sudden end to the Franco-Austrian War, particularly since the battles had not led to the complete defeat of the Austrian army. Despite the victories at Magenta and Solferino, Emperor Napoleon III chose to reach a truce with Austria early in the conflict, causing discontent among some of his Italian allies, especially Cavour, the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Sardinia Piedmont. The agreement came after a series of negotiations between France and Austria, during which Napoleon III sought to avoid a prolonged and complex war that could deplete French military strength. Under the Treaty of Villafranca, Austria agreed to cede Lombardy to Piedmont, while retaining control over Venice, which remained part of its Italian territories. The agreement also allowed Piedmont to expand through the annexation of Lombardy, but did not achieve the comprehensive unification of Italy that some had hoped for. This agreement was disappointing to Cavour, who had hoped the war would inspire a broader unification movement under Piedmont's leadership. He had expected the joint victory of Piedmont and France to liberate the rest of the Italian territories from Austrian control, but the agreement fell short of his ambitions. Although the Treaty of Villafranca officially ended the fighting, it failed to fulfill the war's ultimate goal for many Italian nationalists. At the same time, popular movements erupted in some Italian duchies, such as Tuscany, Parma, and Modena, protesting what they saw as betrayal as they aspired to achieve full Italian unification under Victor Emmanuel II, King of Sardinia Piedmont. During this period, Cavour began reassessing his position and held consultations with Napoleon III to ensure Piedmont could continue its unification project. Later, under popular pressure, referendums were organized in the independent Italian regions, where citizens voted in favor of joining the Kingdom of Sardinia Piedmont. As a result, the southern part of Italy gradually began to free itself from Austrian dominance. Although France had achieved military success in the war, Napoleon III faced intense internal pressure in his own country. After the war, there was significant opposition from political and popular sectors who believed that France had intervened in the Italian conflict for personal and ideological reasons, rather than out of genuine national interest. Over time, the gap between French ambitions and Italian aspirations became more evident. Napoleon III began to realize the need to maintain a delicate balance between supporting the Italian Revolution and preserving his interests in northern Italy, which included maintaining stability in border areas such as Nice and Savoy. For Austria, the war and defeats at Magenta and Solferino dealt a heavy blow to its military prestige in Europe. Although it did not lose all its Italian territories at once, Venice remained under Austrian control until 1866, when it was annexed by the Kingdom of Italy after Austria's defeat in the 7 Weeks' War against Prussia. However, politically, Austria had effectively lost control over northern Italy, enabling Italian nationalist movements to expand. As for Piedmont, the war represented a step toward achieving its goal of unifying Italy, even though Cavour felt disappointed by the early truce. Nevertheless, he managed to achieve a partial goal. Most of Lombardy was liberated and brought under Piedmonte's control, strengthening its position on the European stage. By the end of the war, although Italian unification had not been fully achieved, the outcome fueled a wave of popular movements calling for annexation to Piedmont. Italian nationalist forces, including Garibaldi's armies, continued the momentum toward full unification in the following years, ultimately leading to the proclamation of the Kingdom of Italy in 1861 under the rule of Victor Emmanuel II. These wars had succeeded in liberating most of Italy from foreign control, placing Austria in a weakened position and giving Piedmont the lead in the Italian nationalist movement. In the end, the Franco-Austrian War of 1859 was a turning point in Italy's history, laying the cornerstone for its later unification. Though the Franco-Austrian War ended in an incomplete settlement, it was a decisive factor in shaping modern Europe. It shifted the regional balance of power and pushed forward the Italian nationalist movements, contributing to the founding of the modern Italian state. Although Austria retained some of its territory, its dominance over Italy effectively ended, opening the door for gradual unification and the emergence of a new political entity on the international stage.